Jake Bates and Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears. What a Tuesday.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Matt Dery with you. It is Locked On Lions on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day on a Tuesday, June 11th and a Wednesday, June 12th. Thanks for checking us out, stopping by, and making us your first listen each and every day right here on Locked On Lions. That includes those of you that subscribe and watch us each and every day on our Locked On Lions YouTube channel. Thank you to our everydayers that are out there. Thank you to those of you that are checking us out on Twitter at Dery Speaks, at Locked On Lions, Matt Dery Facebook fan page. And again, like I said, on our Locked On Lions YouTube channel. Program today brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We're going to talk to Lorin Cox, the host of Locked On Bears, coming up momentarily here on the program. Yes, we got to get an update from Chicago. What's going on with the Bears? People talking Super Bowl. I swear to God, the Bears Super Bowl odds, which we went over yesterday on Locked On Lions, are higher than teams like the Steelers and the Browns. The Bears, playoff team, 7 seed, all this stuff. Let's pump the brakes here. But I do like some of their players on defense, certainly Sweat and Johnson. Got a lot of good receivers. Of course, now everybody in Chicago is very excited because the Bears and Chef Poles did do the right thing, and that was jettisoned Justin Fields to make room for Caleb Williams. So we will talk about that, all of that, with Lorin Cox coming up momentarily here on the program. But the big news today, my executive producer, my main man, everydayer Nate Litke, texts me this afternoon, I'd say this morning, whenever it was, and says, I'm going to find it right now, Jake Bates, 2024 All-UFL kicker, the pride of the Michigan Panthers, the man who went 17 out of 22 kicking field goals, including hitting from 64 yards, a bevy of 60-yard field goals. Like I said, named All-UFL. According to Dave Burkett of the Free Press, Jake Bates was in Allen Park today meeting with the Lions. We talked about it last week. James Turner looking good, kicking the ball well, the rookie from Michigan, pushing the money badger, Michael Badgley. I said, well, this probably leaves Jake Bates out, but the Lions are smart. Why not have a meeting with this young man and see what's up? Because at Ford Field, he was blasting through 60-yard field goals like shooting fish in a barrel. The Jake Bates era. Yeah, we've been waiting. Why not bring him in? You got a roster of 90 guys right now. Bring him to training camp. Keep Turner, keep Bates. Let's go. Badgley, let's have a big competition. I mean, the Lions have only, soiled through, 20 kickers already in 4 years under Brad Holmes. Let's go one more. Let's make it 21. No, I'm not going to reach for the list and read them all off. Maybe I should. Where's my list? You've seen the list. Oh, come on. Should I do it one last time? Should I go Zane Gonzalez, Randy Bullock, Matthew Wright, Austin Seibert, Ryan Santoso, Aldrick Rosas, Riley Patterson, Austin Seibert again, Dom Eberle, Michael Badgley, Rosas again, Sam Ficken, Patterson again, Badgley again. Now we got Badgley again. We got James Turner. And now we might have Jake Bates. Now here's the bigger news. Aaron Wilson, NFL insider, reporting that not only are the Lions interested in the UFL legend, Jake Bates, the man who, by the way, did not kick in college, was a soccer player. But other teams interested, according to Aaron Wilson, NFL insider, include the Ravens, the Commanders, and yes, Peter Bukowski's Green Bay Packers. No. See, we can't let Jake Bates out of the state of Michigan to go beat out Anders Carlson and become the Packers kicker. We can't have that. Could you imagine Jake Bates for the Packers kicking at Ford Field and blasting through 64-yarders? No, can't let that happen. KJBH, keep Jake Bates here. He's one of us. He kicked for our Michigan Panthers. How did our Panthers even do this year? Is the UFL is the UFL even going to be around next year? I mean, God bless The Rock and all this stuff. And look, my guy Scotty Nelson from U of D Jesuit High School in Wisconsin was on the San Antonio Brahmas. I think they won it all. Scotty's my guy. Former Lion, Scott Nelson. But anyway, that's the latest news on Jake Bates. All right, what's going on in Chicago? We're going to talk to Lorin Cox. All about that coming up next, right here on Locked On Lions.
Today's episode of Locked On Lions is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and much more, and you can bet on it all over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So go and find a heavy favorite somewhere, put $5 down. If you win with that heavy favorite, not only do you get the winnings, small winnings, from that $5 bet, but you also get $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 that you can use to bet on everything from finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. You can get in on player props as well. How many points will a certain player score? How many pitches will a certain pitcher throw? How many hits will a certain player have? There's a ton for you to check out over at FanDuel. It doesn't get any better, especially here in summertime. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add big wins to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
But as promised, folks, let's bring in Lorin Cox, host of Locked On Bears, right here on the Locked On podcast. Now we're getting an update on what's going on in Chicago with the Bears. He joins us today here on Locked On Lions. Lorin, great to see you, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Long time no see. What, man, has the worm turned in Chicago or what? People are going crazy for this football team all of a sudden, and people are talking playoffs. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was whether they had drafted Caleb Williams or traded the #1 overall pick and added more around Justin Fields. I think there was a feeling like playoff expectations were going to start this year with just the ability to keep adding to this roster and feeling like they finished last season strong. I mean, it was certainly a rough start to last year, but then they got a little bit healthier, added Montez Sweat at the trade deadline, and things were starting to click a little bit more down the stretch. And then you add the #1 overall pick and all the resources that you could have got for trading down. It was like there was already a little bit of something building here, but then you do Caleb Williams and not to overlook Rome Odunze as a pair with that, really added a lot of gasoline to that fire.
Let's go back even before the draft, and obviously everybody was talking about getting the quarterback, which they did in Caleb Williams. You mentioned Rome Odunze and some other good pickups. Free agency, they got DeAndre Swift and all of that. But at the end of last season, what was the feeling about Eberflus and polls and everything, and how much has just changed based off of free agency and the draft and how people feel about this team just having Caleb Williams there and Justin Fields gone?
Yeah, I think that's an astute observation that 6 months ago, having not played any games over that span, 6 months ago, a decent portion of the fan base, myself included, was ready to fire head coach Matt Dery. That there was a legitimate discussions within that building about, is this the guy that we want long-term to lead this organization? We're getting the rookie quarterback. We don't want to set him up to have a team where you have a lame duck coach and have to turn that over after a year and then get a new coach in for the quarter. So they really had to kind of take a long look at this and say, is this our guy or not? Did we see enough from him during this season? And I kind of felt like his inability to pick coordinators, they replaced both of his coordinators this offseason. Like that was a little bit disqualifying for me, but the Bears kind of stuck by the idea that, hey, there was a lot of adversity here and that this locker room could have fallen apart and that this could have gotten even messier, but that his leadership at the top was able to hold them together as, their defensive coordinator was fired after week 2 or left the organization under interesting situations. And they had the Chase Claypool debacle. I mean, a lot of different things went wrong around this team and they did hold it together and get through things. So I think Eberflus deserves some credit for that. And there is a lot of confidence in their offensive coordinator pick, Shane Waldron, being enough to kind of lift the offense and Caleb Williams there to, even if Eberflus isn't a perfect head coach, he can at least be that CEO type that can kind of oversee everything.
Interesting. Shane Waldron, who of course was running the Seahawks offense, which when Geno Smith and the Seahawks came to Ford Field the last couple of years, they could not be stopped, kind of ironically enough. We're talking to Lorin Cox, of course, Locked On Bears. All right, Caleb over Justin. That went on for months on Chicago Sports Radio and on your show. Now that the dust is settled, how does everybody feel about Caleb, and how's he looked so far in minicamp?
There were definitely some hurt feelings initially among a loud contingency of Bears fans that were, Justin Fields to the death. And like, I get it, right? Like Fields was easy to root for. He was a good guy, an exciting player that you feel like, oh man, if you put even more pieces around him this offseason, like what more could he do? But eventually you kind of feel like, okay, how many years do you wait to see if he's going to really put it all together? And you pass up a quarterback with the number one pick 2 years in a row. Like the writing had been on the wall there. And I think it was easy enough to accept it when it's truly, the number one overall pick and you feel like you get the best quarterback in the draft, as opposed to just getting some quarterback in the draft. And so I think everyone is pretty much fully on board the Caleb Williams train. It helps that he's also seems to be a great guy and easy to root for when you hear him talk in Chicago, and he's been out in the community and goes to a lot of the sporting games and like, even the Chicago Sky, I mean, White Sox, Cubs games, etc. Like he's just really ingraining himself in the community and kind of showing himself to be a man of the people. And then you add in some of the weapons they put around him this offseason with, as you mentioned, Shane Waldron as the offensive coordinator. And like there's such a hype and a feeling here that it is slightly different, I think, from the past excitement you've had for guys like Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields, who certainly people got behind fully, but didn't pan out in some of the same ways. But I think there's a feeling, something a little bit different about what Caleb's coming into compared to what those other quarterback experiences were like.
Rookie quarterbacks normally don't do well, and it takes some time. Obviously, last year, CJ Stroud was almost like an outlier and was phenomenal. I mean, do Bears fans and do you, Lorin, think that Caleb Williams can have a CJ Stroud year right away?
I think I'm worried that expectations are getting that high, right? That it's like, okay, all of a sudden, if he doesn't have 4,000 yards and 35 touchdowns, is he going to be a disappointment in his rookie season? Like I'm trying to sort of tamper that down a little bit, especially just because like he doesn't need to do much to be the best rookie quarterback in Chicago Bears history. Like the franchise record for rookie passing yards belongs to Mitch Trubisky. Actually, it's like 2,200 yards. So like if Caleb just plays 10 games, he shouldn't have too much trouble actually breaking that record. And the rookie touchdown record's like 11 touchdowns. So like if he's healthy, he's almost virtually guaranteed to have the greatest rookie season in Chicago Bears history without it needing to be a CJ Stroud type year. So I've been kind of putting him somewhere in the middle where I don't think he's going to be anything like horribly rough. I think people think back to like Peyton Manning's rookie season with a bunch of interceptions and stuff. Like I think he'll be fine and, finish, I don't know, bottom third, 25th, 20th in passing in the NFL. And that's perfectly fine, right? It's not necessarily about the numbers for me. It's about how he looks, how he fits in this offense, and how the team as a whole kind of continues to grow around him through the ups and downs.
I just don't know which guy we're going to see. Obviously, to me, he was the best of the lot of all these quarterbacks, and certainly Jaden Daniels, Drake May, JJ, and all that. But is it going to be the Caleb Williams from 2 years ago, or is it going to be the guy that was, crying on the sidelines, and USC was a big disappointment? I just time will tell, right?
Yeah, I think the feeling is that the supporting cast in Chicago right now, it's not perfect. I don't know if there's ever such thing as a perfect supporting cast, but it's good enough now to where it feels like there's no excuse. I mean, there's the regular like rookie excuse, right? But you're not going to get through the season and go, oh, well, Caleb just didn't have good enough receivers, or, oh, Caleb just didn't have a good enough running game, or, good enough tight end. Like there's a couple of offensive line questions that I think are valid, but given the talent they have everywhere else, there's this feeling like we are going to see right away just how good Caleb Williams is and can be. Then not it'll be his peak or anything, but like this is as good of a situation as any rookie quarterback in the NFL has come into in quite some time as a year one starter. So it's like, all right, like this is it. We're all in on Caleb, and let's see exactly what he can and can't do with this group. Understanding that there's some patience involved with that, but not as much as I think other rookie quarterbacks typically get, where you can kind of point to and say, yeah, they're still kind of building the team around him. Like, no, this is ready for Caleb to succeed now.
I referenced and mentioned both earlier. DeAndre Swift, the former Lion in Chicago. What did you think of the contract? And are you like everybody else, especially Lions fans that are listening and watching this show? They know the injury history. He can't stay healthy, but he looked damn good last year in Philly.
Yeah, he looked good in Philly, and like, I think he's an upgrade over what the Bears had at running back, but like not that much. Like running back was one of their strongest positions, and so like that was a signing that it was like day one of free agency. Ryan Poles came out and like, boom, we got DeAndre Swift, and I was kind of left wondering why. Like
Yeah.
not that he's a bad player. It's about what the team needs versus doesn't needs, and putting $8 million a year in a running back when you already had Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson and Deontay Foreman had played really well for them the past season. Like the running back position was fine. Like they could use more on the offensive line. And that was before the Keenan Allen trade. So at the time they certainly needed wide receiver and some different pieces on defense. So I think Swift is going to be good for them, and they don't have to rely on him to be, the every down back because of the depth they do have. So hopefully that can maybe mitigate some of the injury history, but it just isn't where I would have invested. It felt more like a luxury that the Bears weren't quite at a position to invest in that kind of luxury yet.
Is Lorin Cox picking the Bears to go to the playoffs? We will ask him that coming up next, right here on Locked On Lions. Lorin Cox, Locked On Bears, with us today on a Tuesday edition. Mike O'Hara, ex of DetroitLions.com, legendary Lions writer, will join us tomorrow. Back with Lorin Cox, our buddy from Locked On Bears, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Matt Dery with you. It's Locked On Lions for a Tuesday. Defensively, Lorin, I mean, like you mentioned before, Sweat, Jalen Johnson, the linebackers, there's some good pieces here. Is that where maybe the Bears lean on this playoff talk stuff going, if we could just stop people like we did at the end of last year? Look, they gave Jared Goff and the Lions fits at Soldier Field late in the year. Is that where this feel good kind of feeling is because of this defense?
Definitely. They want to be that team that's a little bit more defense first to help the rookie quarterback. And they've been using the phrase a lot, like this, like players on both sides of the ball say, this looks like a top 5 defense. We're playing against a top 5 defense. We are a top 5 defense out there. And I feel like that's a little bit strong. They finished 20th in points allowed last season, right? Like we can say, hey, this defense is good and could be the front of the team, but not have to crown them a top 5 defense before the season even starts, because I still have a lot of concerns about the defensive line. I think the back 7 is really solid. One of the better back 7s in the NFL, between a veteran safety and Kevin Byard, and then a group of young cornerbacks and safeties around him. Like, I think that's going to be a really solid group there. And the linebackers are pretty steady veterans too. But outside of Montez Sweat, they don't have a pass rush. It is a lot of younger, lesser proven players. And I think they're still going to address pass rush between now and training camp. Everyone is expecting them to re-sign Yannick Ngakoue, who they brought in last season, but was a major disappointment anyway. So it's not like that's the grand solution to unlock all the pass rush. So I'm not ready to say this is going to be a top 5 defense the way that the team is kind of outright saying it at this point, but I think they'll be good enough. I'm concerned about how they're going to unlock that pass rush. They need like 2 or 3 younger guys to take that step forward, and some of them will. But usually not all your young guys all get better all at the same time. Usually some guys get better and some guys don't, and that's okay, but they're really counting on a few different guys to take a big step forward that I just don't think they're all going to.
What worries you the most? You mentioned before about maybe the edge opposite of Sweat, but what else concerns you? What weak spots do you think could still hold this team back?
Yeah, it's the interior of both trenches. So the center position on the offensive line, and really right guard is kind of a question mark too. The free agent signing from last year, Nate Davis, has been inconsistently available, a lot of injury stuff back and forth, and was absent from the team for a little bit, doing some off the field stuff. So the center right guard position, both are kind of in flux at this point. And then, yeah, like the interior defensive tackle spots. I love the nose tackle Andrew Billings, but okay, a nose tackle is great, but that's not the key to your defensive line, at least getting after the quarterback. But the 3 technique pass rush spot is so important in this defense. And they're relying on last year's 2nd round pick, Gervon Dexter out of Florida, who came in as a physical freak, but a really raw prospect. They kind of had to reteach him stance, getting out of his stance, using his hands, like really kind of rebuild him from the ground up based on, Florida asked him to 2-gap a lot and kind of just, kind of hide the top of the pocket and watch the quarterback as opposed to really attacking uphill. So they believe in him and think he's going to take a step forward. But until we actually see that, they just don't have depth either on the interior of that defensive line. So I think those are the 2 areas where right up the middle, which is important on both sides of the ball, could be a little bit tricky, but they've got so much talent around those spots that you feel like maybe they can find ways to use the scheme on both sides of the ball, the pass protection and maybe blitzing a little bit more to overcome that weakness with the other talent that they have. But I think that does still limit them and limits the ceiling a little bit of how far they could go this year.
Tell me about, you know, you mentioned Eberflus before. He's got the new coordinators. You know, Luke Getsy got a lot of heat last year. Justin Fields, all that's gone now. If this team finishes, I don't know, 7-10, 8, I mean, what's the number for Eberflus before maybe his number is called?
Yeah, I think because it's Caleb's rookie season, he's going to have a particularly long leash. And it's easy to forget that, I mean, they did finish 7-10 last season, right? Even though they had the number 1 overall pick, that was from Carolina. So, like, I think if they were somehow worse than 7-10, you know, if this were a 5 or a 6 win team, then Eberflus is probably in some heat there. You know, it's funny, like Matt Eberflus is in the, you know, you see like the blog articles of like coaches on the hot seat. People list Matt Eberflus. He's also the betting favorite on FanDuel for coach of the year. Like somehow he's both on the hot seat and coach of the, I mean, he was tied, I think, with another coach of the year. So it's a very weird spot he finds himself in. I think it would kind of depend on how they get to a low win total. Like if, you know, heaven forbid Caleb Williams gets hurt or whatever, and they win 5 games, okay, they're not going to fire Matt Eberflus. But like if this team is relatively healthy and continues to underachieve, I don't think his job is like 100% safe by any means, but I do think it would take a pretty big disaster for them to eject that quickly after giving him a pretty ringing endorsement this offseason of saying, yes, we believe he is the guy to build around with Caleb Williams.
You know, last year, you know, and I made fun of the Bears a lot, and I was never a Fields fan, but man, I mean, they gave the Lions fits. Probably should have swept them. How do you look at Detroit? Are you on the Green Bay bandwagon? Like some saying they're going to overtake the Lions, or you still feel like Detroit's the best team in the division?
Yeah, I still think Detroit's got the most ammunition here, right? I mean, they're still the most loaded of the teams. I do wonder, like, long-term, now that you've got all this money invested in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell and Jared Goff, all those big contracts, like, eventually those are going to start catching up, but not yet. Like, not in 2024. With Ben Johnson still back and some of the pieces they added in that defense, like, I think the Lions are still the top of the NFC North. And I think Green Bay is going to be good too, and will push them a little bit, but not, I don't see Green Bay as like clearly overtaking them right away. And then I think there's a pretty big gulf after them before we get to the Bears and then the Minnesota Vikings. I'd probably put 4th at this point.
Do you hate Peter Bukowski?
The listeners of my podcast hate Peter Bukowski.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, anytime I wear our Locked On green and yellow shirt, that's the Locked On Podcast Network colors, I get comments every single time. Why is he wearing Packers colors? Why aren't you wearing blue? It's like it's really deep.
I figured I'd throw that in. All right, so you got the Lions, you got the Packers, Bears, obviously. Do you think, I mean, are you picking Chicago to go to the playoffs? You think they sneak in? What do you think?
Yeah, I think realistically they will push for a 7th seed. Like, I think they're a 9-ish win team, and if things go really well, maybe they'll go 10 and be a 7th seed. Like, I don't see them finishing higher than 3rd in the NFC North, but I do think they're going to be right on that fringe. You know, like last year, like where Seattle was too, like all these teams where they're within a game of each other and maybe a tiebreaker is what gets either them in the playoffs or them out of the playoffs, depending on how, especially the NFC West out there with the Rams and the Seahawks and the 49ers. Like, it's going to be like the Bears versus the 2nd and 3rd place teams in that division and maybe the NFC East, and they're all going to be within a win of each other. So, like, definitively, am I going to say they are for sure a playoff team? No, but I think they'll be right in the mix, and it might be week 18 against Green Bay to decide whether they get in or not.
Oh my goodness. That would be something else with that rivalry, certainly. And you versus Pete, me versus Pete. It's always somebody versus Pete. But as you know, Lorin, great to see you, brother. Thanks for catching up, and we'll do it again soon.
Hey, thanks. I hope to be at least your listeners' 3rd favorite Locked On. As long as I'm ahead of Peter in their eyes, that's all that matters.
Oh, it's not even close. He's been, I'm sure you've seen it on the Twitter machine. He's been trolling Lion fans and says the Packers have the superior roster and everything else. So, you know, I've seen him troll you as well and Bears fans lately with Caleb Williams singing Packer. What does he want? Come on, that's all fun.
We gotta find a way to fire back a little bit better, but it's hard. It's an enemy of my enemy is my friend. You know, we got to figure this out.
See, he has such a beautiful family of the wife and the young kids. It's like, you know, I don't want to get too personal with them, but great to see you, Lorin. Thanks so much.
Thanks, you too.
Lorin Cox with us, Locked On Bears on a Tuesday, Locked On Lions. Thanks for making us your first listen. Again, tomorrow, Mike O'Hara with us. 47 years covering the Lions and retired. We'll get his thoughts on everything tomorrow right here on Locked On Lions.